Hello again, Stephen D here. Today I'm going to talk about why I've made the decision to proceed with DemExit. Now, DemExit, if you don't know what that means that if you're a member of the Democratic Party, if you're registered as a Democrat, you go to the effort, do your board of elections online website or however it's required, and remove yourself as a registered Democrat, and either choose another party or indicate that you're an independent. So there's a number of people that have been promoting this idea for some time. Most of them, I believe, are choosing to do it the day of that Hillary Clinton is officially announced as the nominee, or some other day. I don't think it really matters that much, but let me explain why I think an idea which originally I was opposed to, I've come to the conclusion is necessary. Now, normally, I'd say, why abandon a party that, one of the two major parties that control our politics? Why not change it from within? Well, we've seen efforts to change the Democratic Party from within. We've seen efforts to push them back toward supporting individual liberty, individual rights, the general welfare of the people, the New Deal, Democrats. And we see that after Jesse Jackson lost his effort, and created his organization, we've seen it in the case of Dennis Kucinich, who also created an organization to try to push the Democratic Party to the left and work within it. We've seen it from John Dean. And in each case, Democratic Party continued to move more and more to the right, particularly on economic policies. And I think the reason principally for that is that the Democratic Party, much like the Republican Party, is primarily funded by large multinational corporations. Corporations since, and also billionaires, individual wealthy people, but primarily corporations. And these are groups that, since Citizens United can now spend unlimited amounts of money, either as donations to campaigns or by paying for advertising to promote their agenda, and also through their influences in corporate media, as being the major advertisers of corporate media. They have a great influence on what our corporate media organizations care about or are willing to cover in their news coverage. I don't think anybody disagrees with that after having seen how little Bernie Sanders, a man who has rallied thousands and thousands of people everywhere he goes, how little coverage he got versus the coverage that Donald Trump got, or Hillary Clinton got, or even people that were ended up being also rans, like Senator Rubio or Ted Cruz. They got more media attention when they were actually in the race than Bernie Sanders did. And then there's a reason for that. It's because Sanders' message essentially says corporations have too much power, and I'm not going to accept donations from them. I'm only going to accept donations from real human beings. So how did corporations get to the point where they control our government? Through their campaign donations, through their lobbying, How did they get to the point where, as a recent study shown, what corporations and large wealthy donors want gets approved and passed into legislation far more often than anything that public opinion, the majority of the people, real actual living human beings want passed into legislation. And I think you have to start with, the founding documents of our country. The first one I want to start with is the Declaration of Independence. And I'm going to just recite real briefly a couple of things. So bear with me. In the Declaration of Independence, probably the most famous paragraph in it reads as follows. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." And that was a radical idea at the time. That idea was saying that people are the true sovereign, the people are the true rulers of government, not monarchs, not tyrants, not oligarchs. Individual people, collectively together, are the ones who have the power to determine what form of government will, be instituted. And if you go back at the end of the Declaration of Independence, you have them saying this is literally the last sentence of the Declaration. It says, "And for support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Now, who signed the Declaration of Independence? Human beings. Not a single corporation signed it. Not a single corporation or company or other such legal entity is named in the Declaration of Independence. So, that's what number one. Number two, the United States Constitution. All you have to do is go to the preamble, and it makes it real clear who is the rightful sovereign of the United States. It says, this is the preamble, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." So again, that makes it real clear. People, we the people. Did they think that corporations were people back then? No, they didn't. Corporations back then were organized, primarily for the benefit of churches or for universities, or in some cases specifically to, provide for something, a need or a benefit that could not otherwise be obtained by ordinary business. And you had to go through state legislature to get a bill passed to obtain your charter, and then that bill, had to be signed by the governor of the state, and only then did the corporation come into existence. And back then, corporations rarely were given, as they are today, virtually infinite life. They were usually set for 10, 20 years, some period of time, after which, if they wanted, if they still said there was a need for them, they'd have to come back and obtain again another act of the state legislature to continue their existence. A good example of this is the Erie Canal. There was private group of people came forward and said, we want to build this canal, it'll benefit, the state, it'll help move goods and services back, from the Great Lakes area to New York City. So, but they had to go through the New York State legislature to get that. And at the end of 20 years, the bill that was passed specifically said that all the, property and everything, assets, whatever, would revert back to the state. That corporation would dissolve. I mean, they were allowed to benefit from after building it for 20 years, earn some profit from that, but they weren't permitted to continue. So when did this change? Well, it changed because of two things. One was the passage of the 14th Amendment, which, again, doesn't speak about corporations at all. If you read, the 14th Amendment, it's got 5 sections, most of it having to do with Reconstruction and protecting the rights of African Americans. And it's pretty clear from the legislative history that that's primarily what was debated, was the provisions that dealt with those issues. There was literally no debate about the initial language of Section 1, which is the one that everybody knows the most about. And I'm going to read you what Section 1 of the 14th Amendment says, because it's the one that literally where corporate personhood arises from. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunity of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. Now, and just for the very start of that, you can look at this. Where was the intent to say that corporations were persons? It's not there. Corporations are not mentioned. There's no definition that says persons, because it was understood persons meant human beings. You go to that very first sentence. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. Well, corporations are not naturalized. Okay? They come into existence through state law. Today, basically, you file some papers with the state, you pay a fee, and if you fill out all the forms correctly, you get, boom, a stamp, and there you are. Now you're a corporation. You and whoever else is invested in your company. And you're able to do any business you wish that's legally allowed in the state. So how did it come about that the 14th Amendment became not the protector of the rights of African Americans, but primarily the protector and the promoter of this idea of corporate personhood? Well, at the same time this was going on, there were the railroad companies. Railroad companies were, the big boom, the big, it's like the tech industry is today, the information age. This was the railroad age. This is when the largest enterprises in the world were building railroads. And they wanted protections. And they immediately saw that an opportunity in the 14th Amendment with this reference to persons to obtain rights and privileges that the original founders of the Constitution, and certainly the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence, had no intent of granting to them. And so there was this case in 1886. It's a railroad case. And the case really didn't even hinge upon, defining corporations as persons. But, the Supreme Court, the chief of the Supreme Court, literally stated at that time that he agreed with the people bringing the case, the lawyer bringing the case, a guy named Roscoe Conkling, that corporations were persons as far as he was concerned under the 14th Amendment. And Conklin, of course, also is very famous for having forged a diary, which, he offered up as evidence showing that, Congress all along secretly intended to include corporations as persons. It's total BS, but nonetheless. So that's how corporations, from then on, almost all the cases, 14th Amendment cases, from the late 19th century on into the early and mid 20th century, were cases brought on behalf of corporations to extend their rights under the Constitution as legal persons, except they're not. They're not really persons. They're simply these fictional entities that are created by law. So why did the Supreme Court do this? Well, the chief of the Supreme Court at the time of this 1886 case had been a former railroad lawyer. The former senator who brought the case, Mr. Conklin, was also a railroad lawyer. Surprise. And over the years, those rights were gradually expanded. Not all at once. For a long time, corporations were not told they had, freedom, any rights under the First Amendment. But in 1978, I believe, there was a case in which, for the first time, corporations were, the right of free speech was expanded to corporations. And the end result, as we all know, is Citizens United. And we've all seen the influence and power of corporate money upon both parties. Now, in the past, the primarily went to the Republicans, but after 1980 and the rise of the Democratic Leadership Council, headed up by Bill Clinton, among others, and then his presidency, the Democratic Party went full on supporting a corporate agenda. And that's when we got NAFTA, that's when we got the Telecommunications Act, that's when we got the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which essentially allowed all of these large companies to consolidate and become larger and bigger. And that's why we've ended up with only like 6 major media companies that dominate the market, and a few big banks on, and financial institutions on Wall Street, which again dominate the market, and a few big oil and gas companies and pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and you name it. And these are the companies that donate to both parties. If you go back and look at the FEC filings and who donates, the same people donate to both sides. Why do they do that? To ensure that whoever gets elected, from the Democrats or Republicans, is going to support a Democratic agenda, and then they can come to them and lobby them. They could, they get, access. You and I cannot walk up to our congressional, office and just make an appointment and automatically get in. But somebody who donates lots of money to them, you bet. Some lobbyist that was a former senator or congressman has a relationship with that person, they get access. And this is why we have a situation now in which both parties, support a number of the same things. The difference between them on economic issues is minuscule. Even the programs that get passed supposedly to benefit us, for example, Medicare Part D under the Bush administration, or the American Health Care Act, the ACA, what's known as Obamacare. Those benefit large corporations and primarily, health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. And, we don't have any right. We don't have any power. I mean, we have the right, but we don't have the power to do anything about this because we have allowed this to happen. We allowed these people, these quote new people, these persons with infinite lifespans that feel no emotions, that have only one goal, which is to make profits for their shareholders. They run our government. I'm not saying corporations are bad overall, but they should be a tool to help us make a better society. And instead, right now, they've gone from being a tool to being something that's being used to create income inequality, push money upwards to the top 1% of the people, and particularly the top 0.001%, the wealthiest people in America. And also to provide propaganda through the media, which again are owned by corporate entities and obtain their profits from the advertisements of other large corporations, which is why you saw no coverage of the Bernie Sanders campaign, or virtually none. Here was a guy that was going around speaking at the largest rallies we've seen probably in the history of our country, for a political candidate. Larger than Trump's rallies, much larger obviously than Secretary Clinton's speeches or rallies or whatever. And yet he got no coverage. The media literally made Trump the candidate of the Republican Party by covering him so much. Imagine if they covered Bernie Sanders to that extent. So, Bernie Sanders didn't get the nomination. And in part that was due to the fact that the DNC and the candidate they supported, Hillary Clinton, we all know is supported heavily by large financial interests, billionaires, large corporations, even foreign governments who funded her campaigns or provided funds to the Clinton Foundation. The DNC made sure that they would do everything in their power, because they also get money for their campaigns and for the campaigns of the people they want to run for office and who they pick to run for office, thus denying us our any choice in the matter. They get their money from corporations as well. So why have a DemExit? I'll grant you it's a symbolic act, but every act of protest is a symbolic act. A protest march, is a symbolic action. A march that was Martin Luther King made to Selma, the rally he held, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. That was a symbolic act. But we need those symbolic acts. We need that ability to show that there are millions of us who oppose the current political regime. And I believe that this is true for many conservatives as well. In fact, I would tell my conservative friends, your party isn't doing anything for you. How is it helping you? Unless you're the CEO of some major company who's pulling in you know, 300 or 400 times the amount of any other worker for that company. Maybe even more than that. I'm not sure of the exact number. They're not. You should do the same thing we're doing with this DemExit. You should have a Republican exit and deregister. It doesn't mean you can't still participate, you know, in terms of, you know, making donations to causes you care about, or supporting, you know, organizations that are working for things you support. But it does send a message, I believe, to the parties that we're done with them. They're not for us. Why should we be for them? Why should we give them our money? They only care about the big money donors. The big money donors are the corporations and billionaires. And myself personally, when I deregister, as I said, I'm going to re-register as a Green Party member, because they don't take big corporate money, and I don't think there's any big corporations that would give them any money anyway. But their platform at the present time and their policies and their agenda most closely matches that of Bernie Sanders than anybody else. And I think if we're ever going to have any impact, we're going to have to do a number of, quote, symbolic acts of protest. And so this is why I've come to the conclusion this is one of those acts that is important, that people need to do to show, you know, the establishments of both parties, but certainly the Democratic Party, that we're not going to stand for you anymore. We're not going to vote for you anymore. We're done with you until you decide to become a grassroots organization again and support the rights of individual human beings and not corporations, not billionaires. So with that in mind, I hope you give it some thought. I'm not saying you have to agree with me or disagree with me. I mean, I respect the opinions of those who want to, you know, stay registered as Democrats and work within the party. I respect, you know, groups like Brand New Congress and whatever organizations Bernie Sanders intends to set up. And I may support them with my money. I may, you know, support them in other ways. But I'm not going to register as a Democrat to do that anymore. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you when I see you. So long. Take care.